This was an interview done on KOOP, Austin, Texas.
Start off with how you first came to know Father and the Source family. I actually knew Father Yod before he had the Source. I knew him as Jim Baker when he had the Old World restaurant. Jim Baker had actually 3 famous restaurants all on Sunset Strip, so he was known as a food guru. He was a legend within his own time before the Source. And I had just moved to L.A. from New York, and we used to go to the Old World. So I met Jim at the Old World. It was a very happening place to go to. Just, you know, it had all the movers and shakers. And his wife, Dora, at the time, her and I became friends. And then I ended up being engaged to a rock and roll photographer, Ron Raffelli, and kind of lost touch a little bit with Jim. But I had heard that in the meantime, they were no longer operating the Old World, and he had opened this new place called The Source, vegetarian restaurant, and the absolutely new hippie flower child cosmic thing happening on Sunset. And we were doing a poster for Jesus Christ Superstar. Ron was shooting it, and we needed people that looked like Jesus, and I had heard that everybody had grown their hair. There was a small little family that was forming, and it was the early days of the Source, and they were, they looked like Jesus. So I told Ron that my friend Jim Baker had opened the Source, and I could get models there. In the meantime, him and Dora opened the Source. Dora designed the Source Flower logo, and then they broke up. He got in with Yogi Bhajan and started his spiritual path pretty much in earnest at that point, where he really went for it. And I don't know if she was quite as into it as he was. And so then he ended up finding, his next wife, Robin. And when I came in, he was with Robin, and a very small little group of people had formed, but I had just gone down to the Source, and I had not even ever been there before. I always meant to, but just never did, because I had my own life going with, Ron Raffelli. And we shot all the rock photographers and stuff, the rock groups and the music side of it. So I went down that day to the Source, and as soon as I stepped onto the Source patio and saw him walk out, he was like, of course I knew who he was, but he was no longer Jim Baker. He was somebody else, and he looked like Moses. And when he came towards me with like his entourage, he was always being followed by entourages of people, and he went to embrace me. The only way I can explain it is it was something else happened. I felt like I was, for lack of a better word, like I had just completely became uncoded. It's like something got triggered into me, and I don't know whether I just feel like his frequency imprinted with me, and I started what we call imprinting with each other, bonding, and it raised me to where he was, and I've never been the same. It's like I immediately knew who he was, what our destiny was. I remembered making agreements with this soul before we even incarnated to now be here and do this work with him and to go on this journey with him in earnest at the point that he was at. And I know it might all sound a little foo-foo to some people, but that's the only way I can explain it. I never turned back. I never looked back. I walked out on everything, just left everything, and that was that. And it's been that thread to this day. It has never wavered or changed. And so he made me the family historian and archive keeper, and he said by everything I ended up doing with taking photos and copying the morning meditation tapes and starting to archive and save things for the legacy, that one day that would, that all that work would end up saving the legacy. I was not the only one eventually who helped. There was other people that did photography, and then there was the music, but it all started pretty much when I came in and set up the vibration to do all of that. And then it just continued. He morphed into Father Yod, then Yehovah, and I became one of his 13 wives. And after the family dispersed, everybody just kind of left. They just opened the door and walked out and left. Once the family decided to disperse, I don't think anybody really thought to take anything. So, of course, I, just kept everything, gathered everything that was left behind, and protected it for 40 years, and now I'm doing something with it, and it's exactly what happened. The legacy not only got saved, but it is now being really widely embraced in a very good way by so many people. Between the book and the documentary, and there's other things now happening, and the music, it has touched so many people. And the only thing I can say is, it's all a learning curve, and you have to separate the message of what he was trying to do and the message of who we were, and being part of the forerunners of that time, and what I call the pioneers, that kind of set the whole stage for what's happening now. And within that, there's not everybody's perfect. And that's what the family's going through now, is just everyone has their own reality, their own take on it, their own experience with it, and the man. Everybody's processing it now in their own way. Some people are going, wait a minute, why did that happen? And why did I even stay? Or, some things don't seem right now that seemed right then, but that's the way it is in anything, right? There's, the Source family is no more, but we all stay together. We had an experience, and we do have a bond, even though some of us might not like each other too well in the now. We're all, it's like in any family. There's going to be fighting and disagreements and trying to figure it out and settle things. But all in all, it was an amazing, amazing adventure that has historical and cultural value, and that is now being respected. And all the other stuff that we're going through, eventually, hundreds of years from now, is not even going to matter. In that time frame, it seemed like people were being pulled to the level that they were looking for, the vibration that they needed. Some people went into the Eastern religion, the yogis. Some went into Buddhism, the Dharma Center, Yogi Bhajan, and then there was Father. There was Father Yod with his famous little restaurant on Sunset, where he had a group of people living in the Hollywood Hills in a mansion. And we were into the mystery school teachings. We weren't just, like a hippie group living together. We kind of were a whole other thing, and different than anything that was happening around. And, we became a communal family. And so it attracted exactly who it attracted for people that were looking for that, or even just had karmic ties with being there. We all definitely felt like we had been called forth from another lifetime with this man, and we were here again in agreement for whatever reason. It happened very quickly. People came in very quickly, and we just, we ran the restaurant. We were our own self-contained circumvent force. Nobody had to go out and do anything. We all lived together in the homes. We had home births. We did homeschooling. We were completely contained within ourselves.
How was the vibe in the house? Did everybody get along?
You know, as in anything, there would be issues that came up, but they were dealt with very kindly. I mean, they were just issues, and so they, you know, either came to me or they came to Father or they came to somebody else. If it had to do with the restaurant, there were the restaurant managers. And, you know, there were times that, you know, people weren't happy about one thing or another, or somebody got upset, but it was always, you know, it was taken care of, and if it wasn't taken care of, Father would take care of it. And everybody completely trusted him and loved him, and whatever he said, whether they saw it at the time, they trusted him enough to go, okay, let me just sit on this or think about it, and it always got taken care of. We had a routine. There were protocols. We did everything at the same time. You know, every morning, everybody knew that we were all going to get up and gather. There was no out from that. That was part of being part of the Source Brotherhood. There was just certain things that we were all on a regiment together with, and that kept us together, you know, every morning connecting. And the class tapes are being released in series, and it's like you can find out exactly what the Source family went through by listening to these tapes. He covered family energies. We laughed. We cried. He covered spiritual things. He told stories about himself and laughed about them. And it's kind of like time traveling. You can just get it directly, you know, from the man himself at this point. It was a journey, and we all agreed to go upon it, and that's what we did. And it was so much fun that there was no reason not to get along or be unhappy.
Yeah, and the restaurant was doing very well. Celebrities would come in. There were pictures of celebrities eating there, and other bands at the time. Like I read that Earth, Wind, and Fire would wait behind the restaurant to get copies of Source Family's records.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So you guys were doing well and had enough means to support everyone.
We were actually very wealthy. We were very wealthy, and yes, we did. But money at that point didn't, you know, that kind of wealth or money didn't really mean anything to us. We didn't have a lot of possessions. You know, we didn't, like, our house was very zen. It was very, what I call the Asian influence. We sat on the floor. We didn't have, like, we had dining room tables, but it's not like we all sat down and ate at the dining room table together. And when we had the meditation room where we all had sheepskins, so we all sat on the floor. It was very simple. And we made our own clothes. I mean, we had everything we needed to do what we wanted to do. But we shared everything. Pretty much nobody went without. And everybody got taken care of, you know. There was always shampoo, there was always toilet paper, there's whatever you needed, you got. If somebody needed to go to the dentist or they needed to have their eyes checked, that was pretty much taken care of. And then, of course, the food. You know, people, most everybody worked at the Source, or you could go down to the Source and eat. But we also had food brought back to the house. You know, big boxes and crates of, you know, figs, apples, dates, cheese, cottage cheese. I mean, it's just like you didn't really lack or want for anything.
And how was the music recorded? Would they play in the house when people were there, or were there special times?
Whenever they wanted to, whenever Father was inspired, we made a band room out of one of the garages. And so there would be times they would go in and do that. The band kind of was an entity unto itself, just like the restaurant was. You know, it's like they took care of whatever they were doing. They were together within it, so whenever anybody got inspired or Father wanted to, it was all spontaneous, so it's not like they had to rehearse for it or think about it. And a lot of times it did happen in the morning because that's when we had gotten up so early and they were the ascending currents and things were clear, and it was a very spiritual, in-tune time for us. And then, of course, that was the only time we would smoke what we called the sacred herb, which is the marijuana, but nobody had more than 1 6-second hit. But we got so high on just the, you know, the spiritual chanting and being together that, you know, it's, and So that's when a lot of the creative music was done. Father would he would come down for class, we would all connect, we would get together, and then he would say, let's go into the band room. And we had speakers that were put into the meditation room, so whatever was happening in the band room, because we all couldn't go in there, we could hear in the other room. So it's like everybody got to experience it and enjoy it. Some of the time, Father, something would come down in the afternoon, and not everybody was able to be a part of it or hear it. Well, the next day in class, he'd be so excited. He'd go to, one of the sound brothers, go in and put that on, and then that's what we would do that morning for meditation, is listen to what maybe came down the day before, and then Father would go off on, a teaching on it or something like that. So the music was a very integral part of the family, and it was something that Father had fun with and he loved, and it was something for him to do. And he also said, I will be, teaching long after I'm gone by the vibration of this music and the words that I'm speaking. And we are kind of finding that to this day that's kind of true. And there was just a short period there that he did do that with what he called Yehovah 13. There was we had many family musicians. There was the original band that got together was called Spirit of 76, and that was a rehearsed sound, and that's with 5, 6, 7 of the family musicians. They were just trying to formulate who the musicians were and what we were going to now do with the music as it was presenting itself. And then there was a period where Father kind of did an album with them, but he was on it also. And that morphed into him just with the 3 band members of Yehovah 13 and himself, and that's where he got serious with what he wanted to do. And there came a period when that was done. And then he said, I'm not part of it anymore. I did what I was going to do with that. And then other musicians got together to do other music. Trying to do other bands. The thing is we decided to sell the Source and move to Hawaii. And at that point, things kind of stopped because we weren't set up, we didn't have a band room, and that's when our adventure really started, breaking down. So a lot of the music that was done never got recorded or saved or redone. It took a very long time for the musicians to recoup themselves, and they did that when we were in San Francisco for a short amount of time, and a new band was formed, and they did one album which was never released or saved, but we're finding that music now in the archives, and some of it has been released.
Sky Saxon's involvement, did he first become involved before you moved to Hawaii?
Yes, his name was Arlick in the family, and Sky Saxon was in the Source family, and he lived with us in L.A., and he would work some of the time at the Source, and he was very involved in the music. In fact, Father told him he could come and go, and which he didn't allow many people to do. If you were in the family, you were in the family. That was it. You didn't come and go, and have both worlds. But there was a few people that he saw that they needed to continue to do for whatever reason what they were doing, and Sky Saxon was one of them. He said, you need to be back out there, doing your music, creating, and, come home whenever you can. And that's what he did. And it was right after Father Yod decided he was no longer going to do Yehovah 13, that he was done with that he called Arlick Sky Saxon back home, and he said, but the next band I want you to take over. And it was called Fire, Water, Air. And it was basically with the guys from Yehovah 13 and him. And I think they did one album, and then, like I said, we ended up moving, and that kind of stopped everything.
When you think about the father now, are there any memories that really stick out in your mind or moments in the house and in the restaurant that really stay with you?
Just wherever he went, he just seemed to, have a really, I just remember a lot of laughing, a lot of kindness, a lot of just excitement wherever he moved. It just seemed like he was parting. He was like parting energy as he walked. He was a type of person that was always ahead of the curve, but he was even like always 2 steps ahead of himself. So that's like kind of it evokes a very exciting energy. He was very charming. He was, people just loved him no matter where he went, whether he was at the source, talking to the family there, or people eating there, or people that, knew him as Jim Baker. They would still come there. Warren Beatty and Steve Allen, all those people. He'd go over to the table and say hi to them, and he would work that room, and then he would go back to the house and spend time with people that were back at the house, and or take a nap and have his time there. So it was just he was always good to the women and the mothers and the kids that were at the house. He loved everybody. And the family loved him too. He was just so excited to have his, the brothers in the family and the women in the family, and doing what we were doing. We were on a very wild spiritual adventure, and it was extremely exciting. When he bonded with the family in the morning, that was a complete, we call it a spiritual feeding with each other, a complete support system. He gave to us and we gave back to him. And that, it was kind of like he felt good for the day because we were all there and gave to him, and we felt good for today because he did the same with us. So it was a complete bonding every morning, afresh and anew and clearing and then moving on. The thing, and he had his thread with every person in the family, and some of it was past karma that he recognized. He would just delight and get off on whoever he passed or whoever was in front of him for different reasons or in different ways, and everybody allowed everybody their thread or energy. Let me put it that way. And as far as the women went, we had a sisterhood to begin with before we all became his wives. And we knew the agreements. We knew the protocol. We knew what we were stepping into, and we agreed with it. Oh, pretty much so. And I would say that he took care of things pretty well. There was agreements as a family to begin with, and that carried over into agreements as his wives, as far as everybody giving each other space and honoring and respecting each other and trying to deal in kindness, and that we were on a journey together. And as far as women went, we all were very secure in our thread with him. Nobody was insecure with that one-on-one with him as his woman or wife. Individually, he made sure that we all knew that, and we did. So if he was with somebody else, we never had orgies or anything like that. It was a very sacred thing for us to be with him, and it was, we had our time with him individually. So any other issues that happen, would get taken care of among us as sisters or with him. And he took care of it very well because we were all very secure. And I think women have issues for several reasons that live like that. It's if they're not secure within their relationship with the man, or if there's just one of the other women that are not being, dealing with things in respect and kindness. You don't always have to agree. I'm not saying we all ever agreed on everything. We didn't. We had disagreements. But they were done in I think they were done in a different level than most people were dealing with. And so it worked at that time.
The children of the family, were they taught to meditate as well?
The children of the family were pretty much allowed to develop and roam wild, as we call it, till they were 7. And the thing with that is there were some people that came into the family with children, and then babies started being born. So we didn't really have anybody over 7, I think there was a couple that were probably maybe over 7, but not many. So the thing was is they had their own section, and if they wanted to come to morning meditation, if they could be quiet and sit, Father always let the kids come. It was up to the mother to leave immediately if the baby was crying or the children were fussing, not out of respect for the vibration and for the other people, because that was our sacred time. That wasn't about the children. And but they were always totally welcome, and we didn't have corporal punishment. They were never spanked, hit, or demeaning words said to them or anything, because they were the gods and the goddesses that were being born to enter this new age of light. And that's the way that we tried to raise them and see them. Kids together or go out to their space when they were playing or doing crafts or in their room. He would connect with them. He would always make sure that they all knew he was there, and if they ever wanted to come to him for anything. I think the kids felt pretty good and secure because they had so many people they knew that they could count on and around them.
What was it like for you going back through everything and putting together materials for the book?
Well, after 40 years, it was daunting, and of course I had help. My brother, the Swiss Brother Electricity, came aboard to help me, and then Jody Willie came aboard as the publisher and the editor and so much more. But it was daunting because it was like there was so much, and it was like, okay. And after 40 years, it's like it was hard to do timelines because we moved so fast. So much happened within a day with us. It would be like 7 years. I mean, when we went back, I went, wait a minute, all this happened in 2 weeks. That can't be possible. And so it was kind of hard to do time frames because we lived out of time. We had our own reality. We called it the eternal now. We really didn't live in time, and we had our own spiritual realm that we did live in, and we were able to. So it was hard to go back and start figuring it out, and then some things we couldn't remember, and so, but eventually, talking to some of the other family members, some things got into place, and it started formulating and taking on a life of its own again, and the issue that I had with that is it was like 30-some years later, and I call it we were just kind of flat-lined. We were like, nobody wanted to do anything. It's kind of like everybody was still in the source closet, I call it. And nobody, most people, there are people that have stuff, but most people don't. I had the archives, and most people didn't even want to say they were in the source. I cannot tell you how many people didn't even tell their people they married or their kids, or, it was kind of like we were a cult, and Father had a bunch of wives, and then he went off of a cliff and killed himself. They just kind of like walked out the door and left all that behind, and I felt like for 30 years I was carrying the torch for that and keeping the light on, and everybody thought I was completely extreme. There's one in every group that does that. And So they went, oh, that's just Isis, and they let me just go with it. So when I finally decided to step forward, I asked 5 other people to do the book. I didn't want to do the book. I said, I will help you. Nobody would do it. They all said, why? You know, why beat a dead horse? It's like done already. It's in the past. Or I don't even want anybody to know I was part of it. So I stepped forward with that mentality that I was going to do it by myself then. I'd be the one to do it. And I did. And so for me, that gave me the authority to just go forward and do it. And then after it started becoming like, out in the public and the book came out, people kind of wanted to start getting on the bandwagon, which is normal. You know, it's their story too, it's their adventure, it's their life. And I could only tell the story from my point of view. I couldn't tell everybody's point of view, and there was so much more to the story than what I told at the time. You know, so people kind of got a little mad and a little angry, or they wanted their story told, or I got some things wrong. So I kind of went through a period of, oh my God, why all of a sudden does everybody now want to speak up and stand for us when I was doing it, nobody would help me. So I kind of felt like Joan of Arc all of a sudden, or I stood up and became the target. And some of it was my own fault. I will admit there was a learning curve. At the time, it wasn't my fault because that's not what I was thinking. I wasn't purposely trying to, rip anybody off or do harm. I was going forth with my own authority that nobody wanted to have anything to do with it. And the only way it was going to get done is because of what I did. And that gave me maybe a little authority according to me.
Do you think that the climate and the vibrations, the way the world is today, that there could ever be something like the Source family in these modern times?
There will always be something like that in its own way, in its own time. That was for then. The 60s and 70s hit, and as far as I'm concerned, it was like a special dispensation historically in time. It was like a portal opened, and I do feel like there was I feel everything has a shelf life or an expiration date, and I just feel like we were like shock troops, or, if you're a forerunner or a pioneer, it only lasts so long because that's your job, is just to get things going, get a movement going, and set a foundation, and then you leave it to the next generation to come in and take that and define it and take the best out of that and then apply it to the now. And I think that's what's happening. Who knows? I think anybody can do whatever they want if they can make it work. I think none of us, even today, if you asked any of us, including me, I don't want to go back and live like that. We don't want to do that with each other. We would like to be maybe more together, but everybody have their own space, be responsible for themselves. I just don't know if it would ever be done that way again, but it could be. If you look back in history, there's always been the Romans, the Grecians, the Egyptians, where one form or another, it's kind of been done like that. But they've been in pockets in history. It only worked within that time frame, and then that time frame closed. It was a door that opened, and then it closed.
Best of